Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. I'd like to welcome everyone to our second PERG coffee break. My name is Anna Mayo. I'm with MP&E Cameras and Lighting. And I'd like to introduce our guest speaker who's going to be joining us, Mark Morales, who is Vice President and SBA Loan Specialist with City National Bank. Mark's going to be sharing various information on updates to current relief options for small businesses. And hopefully we've got some good, valuable information that everyone will glean information to. Before we get started, I'd like to take a special opportunity to thank companies that make our PERG events possible. Our annual sponsors, we have 3 of them. We have Panavision, we have Taylor & Taylor, and Canon. We also have specific sponsors for each of our individual events that we do throughout the year. And we have PERG coffee break specific sponsors. This year is our core SWX, Fujinon, Kerner Camera, Light Gear, NFP, Rat Pack, and the Camera Division. So without their generous sponsorship, these events would not be able to take place. A few housekeeping issues before we kind of dig right in. We've asked everyone to go to their top right corner and turn it to speaker view. That's what I've been told that they would prefer for the stream. The information will be recorded. We're also planning to do a download of the chat so that when we get to that point, if your question has not been answered, we can have a record of those questions and try to get confirmation or additional information for questions that may or may not be able to be answered during our session today. We're planning to do about 20 minutes with Mark sharing some guidance. He's also loaded some documents into the chat that can be downloaded as well. You're welcome to do those. Those are at the very beginning of the chat. We'll also have those available with the final copy that we'll be planning to publish as well. So if everyone can keep themselves muted during this section, and then only unmute yourself if you'd like to either raise your hand in the chat or speak once we get to the Q&A section, that would be wonderful. So without further items, let's open it up to Mark, and he's going to share with us guidance and information on new updates for small businesses.
Well, thank you, Anna, and welcome everybody. Again, I'm Mark Morales. I'm the SBA Loan Specialist for City National Bank. I actually support the entire bank, though I sit in Los Angeles. And much of the time that I have spent over the last year has been speaking about the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, the PPP Loan Program, forgiveness, and the second round. Today, I'm going to start with, basically my agenda is going to be to discuss the loan forgiveness for loans under $150,000, which is about 85% of all of the first round loans. I'm going to talk about the second round PPP loan program and who qualifies and what the parameters are. And then I'm going to also talk about what the status is with SBA on the SBA's current status for the second round PPP loans. So if you have access to the chat, I'm referencing the PPP Loan Forgiveness Application Form 3508S. So for loans under $150,000, there's good news for those of you who waited and did not ask for forgiveness already. So you can use this one-page application, and you'll see that it can be used for either the first draw PPP loan forgiveness or the second one. You don't do both at the same time. Right now, you'd only be doing your first draw PPP loan. Once your funds have been fully utilized, you will use this application. And as long as your loan is under $150,000, you've used the loan primarily for payroll and rent, and you fill out the very limited number of questions on this application, you should not have to upload any documents to your bank, your lending institution, though you should keep all of the backup documents in case the SBA decides to audit your loan. So this is great news for the 85% of the borrowers out there. The other applications were a little onerous. The amount of information you had to upload to the bank and to the SBA was onerous, not only on you, but on the banks that funded your loans. And so this is excellent news. The other thing that you may or may not have heard of is that up until the new Stimulus Act, the SBA was holding back, if you received an EIDL advance, that amount from the bank that funded your PPP loan. So there was a balance on your PPP loan if you had an advance and you applied for forgiveness early. That balance will be paid off by the SBA directly. You don't have to do anything. Your bank will get a check for the remaining balance of that loan, and that's all automatic, so you don't have to worry about that. And if you are applying for forgiveness now, the SBA will not deduct that EIDL advance. So that is also excellent news for those of us who have loans under $150,000. And I'll let you know that I also own a small business, and we're a brick and mortar, and we participated in these programs. So I'm intimately aware of how these programs work and how they have affected the small businesses. The second document I'm going to refer to is the Paycheck Protection Program second draw loans. And basically what we have here is if you had received a first draw loan and you have expended all of the funds, then you can, even though you don't have to apply for forgiveness, as long as you've spent all the funds, you can apply for a second round of PPP funds. That can be fully forgiven as long as 60% of the proceeds are spent on payroll costs, and they have increased the number of other expenses you can use it for. The borrower is generally eligible for a second draw PPP loan if the borrower previously received a first draw PPP loan and will or has used the full amount only for authorized uses, has no more than 300 employees, and can demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. Now, for a majority of us business owners, if you compare second quarter 2019 to second quarter 2020 when we were shut down, you should have a 25% reduction. So that's extremely good news for those of us who still need assistance, and a lot of small businesses do. They have increased assistance for accommodation and food service businesses and have opened it up to 501c6s. The second draw, you can apply for a second draw loan until March 31st, 2021. Through any existing SBA 7A lender or through any federally insured depository institution. Credit unions and eligible non-bank lenders are also eligible. So there's plenty of ways to apply. I will tell you the path of least resistance is applying with the lender that you got your first loan with, because you've already uploaded those payroll documents. And if you're applying for, a loan under 150 and you are doing your second round, you shouldn't have to upload any more documents. It's a fairly straightforward application, and it can be funded by your current bank. It just makes it easier because you already have a bank account for them to drop the money into. They already have your payroll information, and we have a very streamlined process. At City National, we are utilizing a portal that's done by Deloitte, and that has made it much smoother for our clients. And let me give you an idea of where the SBA is currently. So the second round PPP program guidelines, the estimated end date is March 31st, 2021. That can be subject to change. We've seen lots of changes with the PPP program first round. Total funds available is $284 billion. The nationwide totals through January 24th, total loans funded is $35 billion. The average loan is 87,000. 65% of those loans were 50,000 or less. Right now, the SBA has a system glitch, surprise, and because they're utilizing a different portal than they used for the first round, there's been a number of glitches with the system. They rolled out on Wednesday a complete guide for all of the different error messages that came out to the financial institutions, and this is happening, throughout system-wide. It's not individual to City National or B of A or any of the banks. System-wide, they were having issues with the new portal. They've given us the guidance, and so those loans that have been applied for that are being held up with these hold codes, they should be able to be moved forward with this guidance. Again, if it's under 150, you should not have to upload any of your payroll documents unless you're using a new lender, a lender different than your first PPP loan, because obviously they don't have your payroll data and you're going to have to upload new. The other thing that the SBA has added to with the second round program is if you did not get a first round PPP loan, you cannot apply for a second round PPP loan if you didn't get a first one, but you can go back in there and apply for a first round PPP loan underneath the original parameters. So if you were denied at the beginning, again, 501c6s, they weren't allowed to apply. If you weren't allowed to apply or you just didn't get into the program prior to it shutting down, you can apply for a first round PPP loan. You can also apply for a draw increase if your first PPP loan didn't cover all of your payroll needs or you didn't supply all of the payroll information you were supposed to, and your PPP loan was not of the full amount. But I would caution you, if you applied for a PPP loan, you got the funds and you go for a first round, basically an increase to the first round, you can't apply for the second round. So you can either do a first round and a second round, or you can do a first round and an amendment to the first round. So for many people, it probably behooves them to do a second round versus just doing an increase. I know that's a lot of information, and all of that is covered in the documents that are in the chat and that will be available to you, I think, by email or on your portal. So if you'd like, that's the beginning part of my presentation. Now, as far as the question and answer portion is concerned, I cannot answer specific calculation questions for your specific business. I can give you general guidance on what's going on with the programs, including the 7A and 504 programs, but anything specific to your calculation of your PPP loan, I cannot answer.
Thanks, Mark, for that information. I think you've covered some of the items actually that are going to come up in this next section, but I want to just circle back on a couple of things. And we've got a couple new questions in the chat that we'll address as well. I know you mentioned the backup documents with regard to loans greater than 150 and less than 150. The question is, if it's over 150, do you still need to upload those backup documents?
Yes, and in answer to that question is yes. What they've done is streamline everything for under 150. The over 150, it has still remained the same. And so you would use the original 3508 or 3508 easy and then follow the instructions on that form.
Okay. Would you discourage borrowers for applying for loans through multiple lenders and try to stick with their first one if they've used that one before, or should they shop around for lenders that potentially are pushing those through faster? What repercussions would there be for applying with multiple lenders? So
in the first round of PPP at the beginning, the issue was that many of the lenders were not ready. And so if some banks weren't ready, I know for my business, our bank wasn't ready when it opened up. So we wound up using Cabbage, one of the online lenders, to process our application, simply because we didn't want the funds to run out before we got funded. And so, and the funds did run out in the first round. So, that's why you saw people doing multiple applications. Both, City National and SBA do not feel that these funds will run out before the actual time frame runs out. And What will happen is, let's say you apply at two different lenders. Once the first lender keys in your information to the SBA, it will lock out all the other lenders. Now, the reason why it's easier to go with the existing lender that you got your first PPP loan is because they have your payroll data, you already have the account set up. It is minimal fuss and muss to do with your original lender, but there is nothing preventing you from going to a lender that you think you can get the loan faster. Just know that whoever keys that in will lock out all the others.
Okay, very good to know. Are round two forgiveness guidelines available? And is there a component related to the FTE levels? And if so, what are those rules that we need to be cognizant of?
So as far as round two, other than having the 350AS forgiveness application, that's good for round two. So it'll be similar, to the round one. You're going to use the same application. I haven't seen anything on further guidance on the forgiveness for round two for over 150. So I imagine it's going to be very similar to the way it was the first time, though they did increase the amount of expenses you can use in that 40% rent, utilities, mortgage interest, and they added some categories to the expenses. So if you can keep within that same at least 60% for payroll, and again, you can use that 100% for payroll, and if you use it all for payroll, you'll most likely be 100% forgiven. But when you come in, I know that many business owners, especially those ones that have brick and mortar, that have rent that is due, even though they may not be up to full revenue. I know for my business, we're using 40% of it for rent because that's the maximum we can, and our rent expense is higher than our payroll expense. So just remember that the 60-40 split is still in existence, but you can use the whole thing for payroll.
I might just add, if this question may pop up as well, and you alluded to it just previously, with some of those expanded eligible costs, some of the people that were in areas that were subject to rioting or had their businesses damaged, there are operations expenditures and property damage costs, as well as supplier costs, PPE, worker protection, that can be a component of those expenses used in round two as well. So that is an additional option for some people, depending on the situation.
That is correct, Anna. I think that was something that, I'm on calls with the SBA, also on calls with, Congress and our representatives about changing this program. That's why there were so many changes to the first round program. And, one of those four, categories were things that really people were, spending money on that we weren't, that the SBA wasn't allowing them to expense them. So, reaching out to your political representatives does work. That's why we saw so many changes to the program.
Right. I think that was a great help to a lot of businesses, certainly those that were hit hard in areas with damage. I have a question with regard to the FTE Safe Harbor provisions under round two and the related cutoff dates.
So that information, again, that's specific, but there's a document that is called Second Draw Paycheck Protection Program, How to Calculate Revenue Reduction and Maximum Loan Amount. It's 65 pages, but it has, it's a little bit less, but basically it's done in a question and answer format and covers pretty much all of that information. You really want to utilize, if you're utilizing Safe Harbor, to reduce your number of employees, you want to make sure that you are engaging your professional advisors, either your attorney or accountant, to determine how to calculate that information out.
Okay, let's see.
And if updates, well, if you remember anything from this call today, SBA.gov or Treasury.gov will have all the updated information, frequently asked questions. All of the forms are available, and they go there first. So, I get them in an email, but they're already loaded up to SBA.gov and Treasury.gov. And so if there's any updates you always want to be checking with that and make sure that your accountant or your attorney or whoever is managing and reviewing your application has the updated information.
Okay. I have another question. I might reach out to the person who posed this question as well if we need a little bit more clarification. What if you stopped using PPP Draw 1 funds at the end of the 24-week covered period? How is it best to draw down Draw 1 funds prior to Draw 2? I'm assuming that this is if there's an overlap in that period.
So if you read the SBA guidelines, you either had an 8-week or a 24-week period to use those funds. If you didn't use all those funds, you may not be eligible for a second round PPP loan, right? Because you didn't use the funds from the first one. So I think you would be at that point saying, why would you need them?
Okay. Let's see. Are applicants that are U.S. entities but have foreign ownership excluded from receiving loans? U.S. entities but have foreign ownership.
So in the first round of PPP, there was a lot of questions with that. At the beginning, foreign ownership didn't allow for a first round PPP loan, and then that was changed because the U.S. employees was the issue. And so, as far as I understand, that as long as the workers are U.S. workers, and you're supporting U.S. payroll, that they're still eligible.
Another question with regard to coverage items, are all PPE items covered? Are you aware of any real exclusions with regard to what could be considered PPE?
It does list in the document, what they consider PPE. Sorry, I'm mixing them up. But for the PPE, as long as you can document that stuff, if you buy a horse with it and put it there and say, we have a horse for PPE, you're probably not going to be able to do it. But, sticking with, I know as a bank, we've got plexiglass everywhere. We've got stickers all over the floor. We've got signs. We've got, the barriers, like the Disneyland barriers. I mean, we've got all of that, and all of that stuff is expensible.
What would you consider to be some of the limitations of round 2?
Well, the main limitation is, you had to have used your PPP first round funds. So hopefully everybody has used them or, intends to use them prior to, the distribution of the second round. The program is capped at $2 million. It is capped at 300 employees. So they're counting temporary employees, as well as, your full-time staff. And you'll have to be able to show that you have a 25% reduction in income. So if you're doing well and you have done well throughout the pandemic, then you may not be able to show that 25% reduction. But if you're, supporting the entertainment industry, there's very few of, our clients that did not have a reduction in income.
Okay. And what forms are the banks typically asking to see to show that reduction in income? And what basis?
So usually what you would show is a quarter, it can be an internally prepared quarter, first quarter profit and loss to a first quarter 2020 profit and loss, right? So because what you're matching is gross receipts, not gross profit. So it's gross receipts.
Okay.
And if you can also do it on an annual basis. So if you've already done your 2019 and your 2020 is less than 25 or more than 25% less than 2019, one of those quarters in that year will be less. You'll have less income, and so you can use annual numbers or any quarter from 2019 to 2020.
Okay. That was my understanding as well. I know several people have had questions about just what the bank actually wants to see for that. So that's super helpful. I have another question. If a business received a first round of PPP and an SBA economic disaster loan of like 150,000, are they still eligible for the second round of PPP?
Yes. There are two different programs. The Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program is a disaster loan. And so it is two different programs. I know they tied the advance to the two, and it was very confusing. And, you know, it took a lot of lobbying, but, you know, thank goodness for the new stimulus and creating, you know, some clarity in that scenario. And if you haven't received an economic injury disaster loan, you can go to SBA.gov and apply for one.
That was a next question that I had. Also, my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that there are still idle advances even that can be available. Can you speak to who might qualify for an idle advance still?
So anybody that didn't get one in the first round, or they didn't get the full amount of $1,000 per employee, can go back in and apply. You would go. This is a program that's run directly by the SBA. You would go to SBA.gov, and or if you just Google SBA EIDL, it'll take you to a link to the application. So if you didn't apply, but remember, the advance, which can be up to $10,000, is fully forgiven, but the loan is not. It is still a loan, and there's no discussion of having EIDL loan, the loan program being forgiven at this time.
One other question, and this is just from some reading that I had personally done as well, with regard to the idle advance, my understanding was that you have to be located in a low-income community to qualify for an idle advance still.
So that's for the people that didn't get one in the beginning.
Correct. So if you didn't apply, because I know some people were very reticent in applying for the idle because of the lack of guidance that was given early on as to whether those would actually be forgivable or not. And if you could ask for both, the idle advance, if you didn't intend on getting the actual idle loan versus getting just the PPP. And obviously, we're all very thankful for those of us that actually did both with the new guidance, so that we aren't left holding loans for all of those idle advances based on the new guidelines. But
as a bank, we are as well.
Yeah, exactly.
To manage those tiny loans is completely onerous, and you know, what happens if the business has gone out of business? What do we do with that?
Correct. I did read some, and is it your understanding that for new idle advances, that it needs to be located in a low-income community, and that those businesses needed to have suffered at least a 30% reduction in gross receipts during any 8-week period in 2020?
That's correct. Right now, that's what it says. We have kind of lobbied for, you know, allowing it to open to anybody that didn't get one, but right now they're concentrating those funds for the disadvantaged areas.
But if you're located in one of those areas and did not apply for an idle advance previously, that could give, you know, a little bit more opportunity for some of those that, you know, because that program closed very quickly as well, and that money, the advance program, was gone. So for those of our people that are on the call that did not apply for that previously and could be in that area, that might be just another potential source of some relief there.
Yeah, I mean, if you recall, you know, when the EIDL program started, the maximum loan amount was $2 million. But, you know, because it was so oversubscribed, they cut it at $500,000 in a few weeks, and then they capped it at $150,000 after that. And that was regardless of what you needed or what you were actually able to show what you needed. You know, I know my dentist wound up getting, you know, around $400,000. Right. And then when we applied for our business, we only got $150,000, but our revenue was, you know, we should have gotten more, but it was capped at the time. Okay. I wish they would put more money into that program.
I'm sure many do.
Yes.
I have another question, and you might need to give a little bit of background on these. I have a couple questions with regard to the 7A or 504 loans. Could you address like what what type of companies potentially already have those, and then how the forgiveness guidelines and deferral options have changed with the new legislation, with regard to 7A and 504s.
So they're pretty, broad programs. The 504 program I'll cover first, and that is for the purchase of commercial real estate or refinance of commercial real estate and large equipment. It's primarily used to buy an owner-occupied building for your business. Those loans we're still doing quite a bit of those loans because the rates on the 25-year on the SBA portion of that loan is down to 2.69. So for a 25-year fixed rate loan, that's pretty attractive. The blended rate with the bank loan is around 3%. And we're doing, here at City National, we're doing a lot of business acquisition loans, which is the 7A program, and we're doing a lot of commercial real estate loans with the 504. The stimulus has provided, and if those of you who had existing 7A and 504 loans, the SBA was making 6 payments for you in 2020 for the existing loans. So if you had a 7A loan, they were paying the bank loan principal and interest for you. And then if you had a 504 loan, which is 2 loans, a bank loan and an SBA loan, the SBA loan was being paid by the SBA. The bank loan was not. So a little confusing, but you had 6 payments that were made for you, and most of them were made between March and September. In the new stimulus, they're providing another 3 payments expected to be from February, March, and April payments would be made on those loans. And then new loans that are funded after February 1st would be eligible for 6 payments. And then there is an additional 5 payments that can be made if you're in the hospitality and certain industries.
So that's an actual 5 payments, not just a deferral?
Correct. So when in the stimulus, they're not deferrals. They are actually making the payment for you. And the IRS has ruled that those payments are not taxable.
Okay. Just kind of
and you can still expense them.
Yeah, that's amazing relief to, I'm sure, a large number, potentially even in our audience, that have those types of loans on buildings that they work out of. Kind of following up on that question again, I have the question, with the limit being noted on round 2 of this program, this is in reference to the 7A or 504, with the limit being noted on round 2 of this program as $9,000 per customer, does that mean $9,000 per loan?
So it is $9,000, as far as I understand it, it's $9,000 per loan. So, and that's principal and interest. So if your loan payment is higher than that, you'll have to make up the difference. Or if you're unable to make that payment, then you would have to work with your lender to put the overage on deferment.
Okay.
And they capped it for a reason, right? I think, again, what you find with SBA and why there's so many different rules and regulations is because somebody figured a way of skirting the system. Right, and so that's the reason why they put in a cap. It's because we're like, why can't I just get a 6-month SBA loan and have them pay for it, and I can buy my building in 6 months? Well, no, you can't do that.
Agreed.
And trust me, people tried.
We briefly covered this one, but I don't think we were real definitive on what is the time frame a business has to spend the second PPP loan.
It's you'll see that right in the document. It's the same, really it's all the same. You have up to 24 weeks. You can choose 8 or 24 depending on how quickly you think you're going to spend those funds. But you can actually pick any date in between. So let's say you know that you're going to use up all the funds in 10 weeks, then at the end of the 10th week when you finish using up all those funds, then you would apply for forgiveness.
Okay. One additional question that he would like some clarification on is are all idle advances forgiven? The 10K from the up to 10K from the first round.
Correct. Now, if you applied for forgiveness prior to them, to the new stimulus act, then the bank didn't get the full amount of your loan when the SBA paid them, but the SBA is going back and paying down all of those idle advances.
Okay. I think we're out of most questions on the chat. What other items that are either in this new Consolidated Appropriations Act or other avenues, what other programs should we be aware of as small businesses that could potentially provide relief that may not be as talked about as the PPP?
So, the SBA has multiple programs. The SBA Express, which was a loan or line of credit up to $350, that has been increased up to $1 million through through December, and then it will drop down to $500. So you can apply for an SBA Express with your lending institution. If it is over $1 million, then you would go to the SBA 7A program. That goes from, you can do a loan from $50,000 to $5 million on the SBA 7A program. That's the flagship and kind of is the catch-all of all the programs aside from the 504. The nice thing that's happened is in the stimulus, if you apply for a new SBA Express or 7A or 504, the SBA fees have been reduced and the guarantee fees have been reduced. So it makes it less expensive now for you to put that loan in place.
Okay, very good.
And then if you fund it after February 1st through September, the SBA will make your first 6 payments up to $9,000.
Yeah, that's great information. I'm not sure if this one is in kind of the realm of what you do or your familiarity, but can you speak at all to changes in the employer retention credit and how the PPP is affected by that?
I do know that in the second round of PPP, you can also apply for the employee retention credits. In the first round, you couldn't, and so that is another one of those changes that was lobbied out, and so you can actually apply for both. I would take advantage of it.
Absolutely, I'm looking at this, even for our businesses as well, but that's something that for those of you on the call, if you did take the PPP, originally you were not allowed to take the ERC, the employee retention credit. But with this new legislation, there's actually a component that you can go back and retroactively get it. I would definitely recommend talking to your tax people and your CPA to see how you actually physically go about getting it. There's still additional guidance to come, but there is going to be a retroactive component, which is up to $5,000 per person, which could be a huge number for a lot of our people. And then there also is a proactive component for 2021. So be sure and check with your CPA about that as well, because it's definitely one that has, we could almost have probably an entire session just on that one as well. So. Well, I know we're about out of time and I want to try to start wrapping this up. Mark, we really appreciate all of your time. I don't know if there's anything else. I'm looking through the chat. I think we've covered most all of these questions.
I might interject since we were talking about taxes. So please make sure that your accountant is up to date with the new rules on the taxation of the PPP loan funds and the deductibility of the expenses. So there was, a lot of conflicting information before the new Stimulus Act came out that you were not going to be able to deduct those expenses if they were paid for by the PPP loans that were forgiven. And so there's updated guidance to that on the federal level, right? Your state may vary, and you're going to have to check with your state to see whether they're taxing any of that. Obviously, state and localities are looking for any revenue that they can receive, and but on the federal level, they did clarify that. So. Make sure that, you understand that you can still deduct those expenses that you used with your PPP funds on the federal level.
Yeah, that's a great point, because there was a lot of question about that early on, and a lot of things really were solidified with this new legislation that are, in my view, the way the program was originally intended to happen to help us out. So.
And that's what happens when you have Congress, which isn't really familiar with how small businesses work, passing these laws, and then the SBA having to interpret them, and then the bank saying, "What the heck is going on here?" And then as a business owner, I'm like, "Why didn't you include rent in the calculation of 2.5 times monthly payroll? What about the rent, right? Why wasn't that included in either first or second round?" And these are questions, and these are things that as individuals and as an organization, you should be reaching out to your congressional representatives to ask these questions, because let me tell you, the reason why there were so many changes for the last program, and I'm sure we're going to see changes to this program, is because people were picking up the phone, they were writing letters, they were sending emails, saying we need help.
Agreed. Before we close this off, I do want to respond. I had mentioned the ERC. What that stands for is the Employee Retention Credit. If you are not familiar with it, definitely there's a lot of guidance out there about it. There are some very detailed calculations for that, but that is one that is going to be very overlooked and is an opportunity to really help some hurting businesses right now. And you can apply for that if you got a PPP. That was a key change with this legislation as well. So I'm not going to get into a lot of it on here. If I can get some more information, I'll try to have it added to like the final transcript as well, just to give some guidance there. But Mark, do you have anything else that you'd like to add? I want to be cognizant of your time as well. I think you have another call starting shortly. So is there anything else that we can help you with?
Yes, well, thank you. I appreciate you having me here today. If you need me to join another call in the future with some updates, I'm happy to do so. If you have not applied for the first round PPP yet, I would encourage you to do so. There are funds available there. If you've already spent your first round or plan on spending your first round funds, I would get in line for the second round. This is money that you will not have to pay back and can really help support your business. And I look forward to seeing you guys again. And if you have any questions, you can also send them to Anna, and they can forward them on to me.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark. These are lifelines to many of our companies in our industry, as you know, and with the items for venues that have come through with the most recent round, there's just additional help that's provided. So I'm going to close us out, and I once again want to thank all of our sponsors for all of their generous donations to help make things like this possible. We hope this has been beneficial. I do want to introduce a coffee break for next week. We're planning another one. It's going to be on Tuesday, February the 2nd, 1 p.m. Eastern. You'll be getting an invitation to that as well. It's going to cover vaccines and legal questions. We'll have guest Jacqueline Rocco with Kane and Kessler, and it's going to be a Q&A with regard to vaccines, protocol, companies, what we need to do as companies to familiarize ourselves with protocols related to vaccines. And it should be an interesting conversation as well. So we look forward to having everyone join us next Tuesday as well. So watch for an invitation for that one as well. Thank you to everyone. Hope you have a great end of your week. Thanks.